Okay, so you ready to start?
Very.
Awesome. All right. Hello, everyone. Of course, we're back for another episode of Is This Adulthood? And Katie's not with us. She's really busy with her current job in film and television, but she's given me the blessing to continue with the podcast and interviewing amazing and interesting guests such as Taylor Blixt, who is a friend of mine since university. So we've probably known each other for like 8 years, I would say, because this
2000,
is my second year.
2012. I
Yeah,
think that's a
yeah.
good call. Yeah.
Wow.
2012.
So it's been a while, but we really reconnected, I would say, like 2 years ago.
hmm
Taylor had shared a really impactful post on social media, which I'm sure he'll talk about here. And he's an advocate for mental health and men's mental health, also specifically, because you don't hear a lot about that. Yeah, I'm really grateful to have you on the show. I think you're going to share some great insights and welcome.
Thank you, Ryan. I mean, I'm very excited. Podcasts are something I've thought about doing, but haven't. So it's cool to have you as a friend and have reconnected to like have this platform.
Yeah, if you don't mind sharing your journey with
hmm
schooling and your career, as well as your struggles and successes with mental health, I think that that would be a great start.
Awesome. And yeah, it's all about the ebbs and flows, like you said, the struggles, but then successes. And, sometimes a lot of the time when we're in that bad space, we can't really think that it's going to get better. And there's always that cliche of it gets better, but I do truly believe that. Um, and it can be hard, and so for myself, you and I met at Western University, a big university, very competitive. I did medical sciences, so I was in the science program. I thought I was going to be a neurosurgeon, kind of like going into first year science, killing it, getting really good grades. And prior to my second year, there was a breakup. There was other things that happened into my life. I did a medical volunteer trip in Costa Rica and Nicaragua, which was very impactful, very insightful. But also, I recognize that I was quite naive growing up in North America. And the things I saw, I only figured out later were traumatizing to me. And, just kind of seeing a very unfair, unjust world and not knowing what I can do to help fix it, because I always grew up trying to, wanting to get into the healthcare field because I've always cared about, treating others and helping them. And so when I know that played a role in terms of me kind of like getting depression in my second year of undergrad, because it was the summer right before that. And then at the same time, I was broken up and, relationships come and go, but, it can be hard. And also my family dog of 14 and a half years passed away the November,
Mm,
right to second year. So as they say, it was a perfect storm.
yeah.
And, that's when my depression first started. And I am very, very lucky and grateful to have such a wonderful mother who told me that, mental health, physical health, it's one in one. We scrape our knee, or like break a bone, we got to go see the medical doctor to get it fixed. Or, if we're kind of like confused and maybe stressed or anxious, we should go see, someone else to talk about it, a psychologist. But that stigma that exists in our society made me think that if I was to see a psychologist, that makes me less than. But I
hmm
was, my mom was very supportive and patient and did encourage me to see a psychologist. So I did start seeing one in my second year. And I remember my first appointment, I just cried. I
Really?
had so much emotions built up because, I was living in a house with five other guys. Guys don't talk about emotions. Going through everything I was going through, I didn't have anyone to talk to about it. So, it was about 6 months into my depression that I saw the psychologist for the first time. And it really helped me just release. And, psychologists, therapists, they're there to not tell you what to do. They're there to listen and be
Yeah.
a non-judgmental space. And, I was very grateful for that. So that's kind of like the beginning of my journey. And I mean, I've shared many things with you, but I'll kind of jump ahead to 3 years later, because through my depression and seeing my psychologist, again, my mom introduced me to someone who practiced, it was shiatsu massage therapy and acupuncture, but she also did something called Reiki. which is a Japanese laying of hand technique. It's an Eastern medicine type of technique for, stress reduction, relaxation. And it is hard for some people to conceptualize energy medicine. But me coming from a science background, I like to think about it at the anatomical level of the atom. Is all the atom is it's this circle that has electrons flying around in it, but the electrons are the only matter in it. So I always like to say, each atom is actually only 1% matter because it's only made up of those electrons, but because they're moving so fast, it takes up that space. So I like to say we're 1% matter and we're 99% energy.
Taylor, I love when you talk science to me.
I try to make it digestible. I try my
No,
best.
it's good. I noticed that you have a tattoo there and the semicolon. And I know that that has a lot of meaning, especially for people that have dealt with mental health issues, depression, and even has, a suicide awareness element to it. I was wondering, do you feel comfortable talking about what's behind that tattoo?
Well, I got it 3 years later in 2015. So my depression started in 2012. And 3 years later, after meeting this Reiki master and having Reiki done to me, and every time I had it done, I felt good for, 21 days or so. And then the depression would kind of come back. And so there's different levels of Reiki, and Reiki level 1, everyone can learn, and that's doing Reiki to yourself. And I realized 3 years after going to see her and having treated that, it's my turn. I need to be kind of self-sufficient. And I took a course between my 3rd and 4th year, summer of 2015, with her. It's a weekend course. It was myself, 3 other people, one man who was in his 60s. He was a retired cop. His wife had died of cancer. And he, for the last 5-10 years, being widowed, is on a spiritual journey. The other 2 were women in their 30s, like a social worker and someone else. And I was a 22-year-old boy who also was going through something with my Reiki master. And so it was a weekend course learning level 1. And the next day is level 2, which is doing Reiki to others. And because it did so much for me, that's why I kind of felt like, I want to be able to give it back. And so this tattoo I got 2 to 3 weeks after I finished my Reiki level 2. And I think it was around 2013-ish that like the semicolon campaign kind of came out. And for those of you that don't know about the semicolon campaign, because it was kind of early 2010s, it's not really around as much anymore, but
Yeah.
a semicolon is used in a sentence when the author chooses to continue the sentence when they could have ended it. So it's all about, recognizing people that continued their life when they could have ended it, for suicide awareness. And for me, I thought that I wanted to have it on my wrist because I wear my heart on my sleeve. I want to reduce the stigma. I want to talk about it. So that's why I got it there. And that was a big part of my journey. And that my post kind of came out. It got a lot of attraction and stuff, but I was just happy to share being as honest and open as I could. So yeah, it was life-changing at that point. And, there's been a lot more of the last 5 years too. We'll get into that, but I'll let you go for a bit because I'm talking so much.
No, I think it's great. And if you're comfortable talking about it, like what was in that post? Like what did you reveal to people? Because as long as you're comfortable with it, but that was the first time that I feel like I'd seen someone, a male specifically who, from the outside looks like he has everything going for him, right? Like good looking, smart. Like I think at that point maybe you weren't a Western grad, but you were going to be a Western grad when this came out. You would have been just graduated Western.
I would have been going into my 4th year, and I was a part of the student council,
student
that's
council.
How we, a soft team, the first 3 years. But it was the 4th year when I kind of took a step back from all that, and I'm like, I've been so involved and I've been putting my energy out so much that's what kind of took all of it away, right? So getting the Reiki, it helped me kind of realize I need to kind of start to look inwards.
Yeah. And it was the first time to see someone reveal so much, I found, on Facebook, who is in such a position of being almost like a public persona, right? Like exactly like you said, you were really involved with the university and you were
Hmm.
really involved with school. And I know you grew up playing sports, and
Yep.
I hadn't seen it to that level before that. I mean, now you see a lot more athletes coming out and talking about, concussions and mental health and things that may be happening with like hazing and the effects of
Hmm.
that. And so I think, but at this time, you didn't see it that much. You didn't see that many men talking about mental health. It's starting to grow a little bit. I mean, there's still a long ways to go, but if you don't mind like diving a little bit more deep into that post, what was behind it and
Yeah.
what gave you the courage to come out and say that? Because like, at that time, that wasn't the popular thing to do.
And yeah, and Facebook and social media, we could have a whole other podcast
Yeah.
about, the psychology and all that stuff. And one thing my psychologist said was get off Facebook. It's a highlight reel of people's lives because, people don't like to share the negative things. And
Yeah.
so because, I had done Reiki and I felt this confidence, right? Of like, I think it's time for me to share my story. And then it was a picture of me with my tattoo. The picture for the post was me right after I got the tattoo. And if you go back to that post, the one side of me, there's like a darkness in the room. And then the other side of me, there's actually the light.
Oh, did you plan it that way or did that just happen
Not at
naturally?
all. That's how the
No.
lighting of the picture happened, kind of like two
Wow.
sides.
Wow.
So anyway, in that post, it was a fairly long post, but I wanted to try and like stomp the stigma is what my, mission for that post was trying to do, because that's what this is trying to do. And, what you and I are trying to do with this podcast, right?
Yeah.
And it's a constant work. And no matter what, we can't, we can always work towards, stomping the stigma, but it's constant. It's going to be lifelong. And that's just the way it is. But yeah, so the post was sharing my story of how people can seem like they have everything going on the outside. Like you said, like that was kind of your perception of me. And I talked about that. And then I talked about, the struggles I've been through, the depression I had, and just trying to be as open and honest. And then at the end, just kind of saying like, I'm doing this because like, I want to talk about it. Like, I want to start this conversation. Like, we have Bell, let's talk. We have things that we do.
Yeah.
But, there's always room for more. So that was kind of like the post, the whole kind of like mission behind it of me trying to tell my story, but also trying to give insight of like, hey, you guys might have thought, because I'm smiling, I'm always laughing, I'm a very extrovert, I'm social. From the outside looking in, it can seem, but I've actually been dealing with major depressive disorder the last 3 years. And that's the realism. And people go through this stuff. And there's so many people that maybe don't even find out, right? Because they're not willing to go to a doctor or talk about it. And they may think that, oh, it's just something wrong with them. And it's like, our mental health one-to-one with our physical health. And when we get confused, when we get stuck, when we start getting maybe stressed more than possible, maybe it's a sign that we need to start, maybe talk about it. And it's as simple as that.
100%. And I'm glad that you did that because it opened up the conversation. Like I remember the comments going, like it was interesting to see how many people were commenting on that post, and you had a lot of support.
It was a lot,
and you probably even had like people reaching out privately too that had never.
I did.
Anything like that.
I had a lot of private messages. It was really good, but this totally leads into my next chapter in my story.
Yeah.
Because learning Reiki, all this stuff, and the post and helping people, I started giving my energy out again.
Yeah.
Because I thought I was good. I thought, okay, 3 years, now I learned Reiki, now I can start helping people. But, it's all about the balance. It's all about knowing. And so in my going into my 5th year of my undergrad, what happened was I actually started to have a manic episode, and I didn't know that was happening because for years I was depressed. And so it wasn't until years later in February 2018 I was diagnosed with bipolar type 1. But it was because the reason why it took so long to get that diagnosis, and this is very common, is that people who have bipolar are usually depressed a lot of the time. And so when they get that manic stage, which is feeling grandiose, you have godlike ideations, you know, I thought I was going to cure the world mental health with my Reiki powers kind of thing. It was very manic, very illogical, but it was the first time in years that I felt good and I felt this energy. So why would I question it? So it was only the people on the outside, like my parents and my family, that noticed a difference. That, you know, in November of 2015, I was admitted into a psych ward at Oak Hill Trafalgar Hospital. And, you know, that can take a toll on anyone's psyche. You know, they diagnosed me with a drug-induced psychosis because during my manic episode, I started getting into, you know, more drugs, like cocaine. But years later, when I saw my psychiatrist that diagnosed me with bipolar, she said, well, yes, you were doing cocaine and that can cause mania, but it was during your manic episode that you increased the intake. So,
Yeah.
you know, Western medicine, the doctors kind of misdiagnosed me. And so they're like, no, you have major depressive disorder. And this was just a drug-induced psychosis. So they let me go. And off I went thinking I still have depression in 2015. I went back on antidepressants. And for me, I'd been on 3-4 different kinds of antidepressants, from like SSRIs to other ones. None of them ever worked. I always had the negative side effects. I always didn't feel myself, right? At the best that I felt with an antidepressant was that I was numb, and that's not me. And you know, and so right now I'm in naturopathic medical school. I'm going into my 3rd year. I completely support prescription drugs. I currently am taking a lamotrigine. It's an anti-seizure, but it's for my bipolar. So I support prescription drugs 100%. I just think that a lot of the time, maybe we don't have the right one. And it's a difficult system. It's hard to, you know, let's give you this one. Let's try it out. And if it doesn't work, but you know, you got to try it out for at least 6 weeks a lot of the time for it to start working. So like that person could be going through depression and not feel good for 6 weeks. And there's a lot, but not to say that I support antidepressants, I support anti-anxiety, but for someone with bipolar, and this is something I learned years later, is that antidepressants actually worsen it. So because I was misdiagnosed for so many years and I was diagnosed with depression and they kept giving me antidepressants, they weren't working because truly that wasn't what I had. And it was 6 years of a misdiagnosis until I got like the proper diagnosis. And that is a journey and a toll on the mental health, like in and of itself. But I can say that when I was finally diagnosed with bipolar and got off the antidepressants that I was taking on the time, weaned off them, and then weeks later started slowly taking the medication I am now, which is specifically for seizures as well as bipolar, that I started feeling like myself again. And that was the summer of 2018. That was before coming back, starting my 1st year in naturopathic medical school. And it was like life changing, kind of like being able to have a proper diagnosis, being like, okay, this is what I have, and now let's move forward. And you know, I had the stigma in my mind of like bipolar, that seems more extreme than depression or anxiety. And it was a little hard to get that diagnosis at first, but my psychiatrist told me there's lawyers, there's doctors, there's all these successful people with the same diagnosis, entertainers. And it's all about getting that self-awareness, you know, getting the proper medication, diet, whatever you need to balance it out. Because, you know, life isn't over when you get diagnosed with a mental health disorder. I think it's a gift because it allows you to move forward and maybe not feel as stuck as you once were before.
I mean, even going back to the fact that when you had to have been, you know, in the psych ward at the time, which must have been traumatizing in a way, the fact that they were placing it on being drug induced. But at the same time, it's like, well, maybe you were taking certain drugs because of you know, what was going on in your mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
In some way to almost self-medicate, right?
Yeah. And
And
there has been a lot of self-medication in my past, for sure.
I think a lot of people do that, including a
Yep.
lot of men. And you see it
Yep.
with sometimes with alcoholism, right? As well. And I think a lot of people maybe numb the pain without even realizing the root of that pain, which could be an imbalance of the brain. You know, like if someone had a broken bone, they would be treated in the hospital and be on some
Yep.
kind of treatment plan, on some kind of rehabilitation plan, whatever it would take to get them back to their normal. That's what would happen. And I feel like with
Yeah.
mental health is like the fact that you even had to, you said it took
6
6 years.
years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, 6 years. And the fact that it
Yeah.
took that long in and
Mm-hmm.
of itself may be a problem, right? Because for all that time, you didn't know what actually was the root cause of some of the issues you're experiencing.
And, self-medicating with things like marijuana, which, now that it's legalized and it's becoming more, used in the general public. And because I've been an advocate for marijuana for so long, I'm never against it. But now I'm turning the leaf of, we need a little bit more education, because just like I had used and then started abusing it when I started feeling bad, I think a lot, especially males, young males too, high school, adolescents, it fogs your mind, and it ultimately inhibited me from getting to where I needed to be, because I needed to numb myself and the antidepressants weren't
Mm-hmm.
working. So like I said, I'd been on and off a couple different antidepressants, and in between those antidepressants, I was smoking weed and I was
Yeah.
self-medicating with it. And
Yeah.
for myself, the 6 years, like, you kind of bring that up, and I'm someone who went to medical sciences. I'm now on my way to be a doctor. And so I'm come from a family that's chiropractors and health focused.
Yeah.
And it still took me 6 years.
Yeah.
And not to say that it's going to take that long, not at all. But for someone like me who you'd think, oh, medical, this guy should know this or that.
Yeah.
No, we don't. We really don't.
No, it's so true. And, there's so much, like, I could talk to you for hours, really. Like, I know whenever we meet up, first of all, whenever we meet up, we always get nachos. Like, that's
We
always our
always get
thing is
nachos.
we always get nachos. We share
Yeah.
it. Oh, I thought you said me. I'm like, hey, you're
No,
part of
no,
this
no.
too.
And chicken wings too. A lot
Chicken
of the time
wings.
we get
We haven't had chicken wings in a while, but chicken wings and beer. And
next time.
next time. And we just like always can chat about this for hours. And what I find interesting about that is, like you said, you have healthcare professionals in your family.
In my family.
In your family. And I know you, and you come from a good background. You come from resources. You come from a support system that's there for you. So can you imagine people that grow up without any of those things? And like you said, it took you 6 years to be officially diagnosed. And the people that don't have those resources, or in communities that may not talk about mental health, and on top of that being a male, where a lot of males are told to suppress their emotions, there's just so
Yep.
much to unpack here. And I think that even it ties back to like sports. Like I remember you telling me your journey in high school with sports and concussions. I don't know if you want to touch on that here, but that's a whole other topic as well, and what you were told with that, and the surgery that you had to go through, and stemming back to wanting to play football and
Yep.
growing up, and that was a path that you were taking, and then having an injury where it took that away. I find
Yeah.
that journey really interesting too, if you care to share it.
I'd love to. And, concussions, that's kind of where my journey started. And I think, with CTE, which is chronic traumatic encephalitis. And so that's a lot of football players now, and they're talking about how at 55 years old, they dissect their brains, and the brain's the brain of an 80-year-old. And it's because of all those micro traumas. And so concussions are rampant, and especially, both males and females are, prone to concussions. But I think like you said, males are kind of like, there's that stoicism, which is kind of that stern, no show emotion that we're kind of, you know, intuitively, subconsciously ingrained in us, that men aren't supposed to cry, men aren't allowed to show emotions. And that, I think, you know, when a boy, you know, because I was 14 years old, I got a concussion. I grew up, my dad was a football wrestler from USA. So I grew up wanting to play football my whole life.
Yeah.
And similar, like a lot of hockey players, you know, they get the concussions, and their community, their friends are all a part of the hockey team. And now they get a concussion and they get told that they're not allowed to be a part of that community anymore. Or
Yeah.
not that they can't be with those friends, but they're not going to go to the games. They're not going to have that same time. So not only is the concussion affecting the neurochemistry, and science is still trying to understand how it's affecting all that, but I see it, and the big part is how it affects the social, emotional, even spiritual aspect of our health, where I'm a young boy who loves hockey, for instance, and all my friends are on the hockey team. And now
Yeah.
I've had 3 concussions in a row. I'm told that my next one could be it. You know,
Wow.
I can't play hockey. And then what will happen is I'm going to be taken out, and there's, you know, you're 50% more likely to have anxiety, depressive symptoms after concussions. And I think a lot of that anxiety, depression comes from being taken out of something you love. It's almost like an identity crisis
Yeah.
occurring when you're 14, 15, you know, young 20s, whatever it is. You have been going this route. You're going to go to the NHL, this and that. That's your dream. And now you need to completely shift gears, and that's hard. And I think especially it does go back to like men not being able to express their emotions or talk about it. That, you know, not saying it doesn't affect females, because of course it does, but
Right.
you know, today we're talking about men's mental health, and it
Yeah.
definitely, because they don't talk about it as much, it can have a huge impact on that social, emotional kind of like being taken away community, and being 15 years old and having to ask yourself, who am I? Which
Yeah.
many people don't do until they're 50, or maybe they don't do that their whole life.
Yeah.
And it's,
Yeah.
and that takes a toll on the mental health. So to me, it's like, there's the neurochemistry, there's the biology and stuff, but I think why there's the statistic of, you know, you're so much more likely to get anxiety or depression after the concussion. I think it's mainly due to kind of like having almost like an identity crisis at that point.
Yeah. And I think that it goes either way. Either they get pulled from the sport, which, you know, I would hope is happening more as we learn more about concussions, or
Yes.
they're being told, you know, toughen up, you know, get your head back in the
Which
game.
is scary, which is very scary.
Taylor, I'm thankful for you sharing your story and your journey, your successes, as well as your struggles. And I'm also thankful that you're here with us today, because you've dealt with a lot. But the main thing is that you've gotten through it, and that you want to use your experiences for good. And I think that for the second half of the podcast, I would love to focus on that, like the moving forward and how we can make an impact, especially since we're talking about men's mental health. How do we go about making sure that we're there for them and making sure that they feel like they're supported?
I know for myself, you know, having a strong feminine figure, and both males, females, however you identify, we can all have feminine energy, and we all have it, the yin and the yang, which is a little traditional Chinese medicine. That's some stuff I'm studying. We're not going to get into that, but we can all have that feminine energy where we're intuitive, we can hold space. And my mother did that for me. I think her encouraging me to go talk to someone about it. And I think that's an important first step, because no matter how much we want to help the loved ones around us, we're not all psychologists. We are not medical professionals. These people
Yeah.
go to school for a reason, for years. So it's about trying your best to reduce the stigma in that person who's in your life that you think may need to talk about some things, or maybe suppressing some things. Doing your best to hold space for them,
Mm-hmm.
non-judgmental, and encourage them to talk to a professional about it. And I think that's a great first step, because at the end of the day, you know, something you kind of said about like alcoholism, and I, you know, as a, you know, soon to be medical professional, I definitely want to deal with like uh, toxic masculinity, all the things that kind of like, I think, contribute to us suppressing things and then
Yeah.
using things such as alcohol to keep it suppressed,
Yeah.
right? So my answer to what can we do is we need to try and unsuppress them, or I don't know if I just made up a word there, but release those emotions. And how to do that is to contact and get into contact with a medical professional. And sometimes psychologists can be expensive, private psychologists. But for instance, the psychiatrist I saw, I got referred to from a doctor. So because I was referred to from a medical doctor under OHIP, I see this psychiatrist. She works out of St. Joe's Hospital, but it's covered under my OHIP, which is amazing, right? I have hour-long conversations and stuff. And, everyone comes from different socioeconomic backgrounds. So sometimes we don't all have a $500 a year private insurance with our companies that we work for, or there's no one in our family with that. And sometimes psychologists can cost up to, mine was like $150 an hour. And, when you're going through something and now money comes into it, that can even add to the guilt and all that. But there are avenues, if you get referrals through your medical doctors at, walk-in clinics that you can see for free, and talking to them about like, I think maybe this, my loved one, or this and that. And there's even programs that, on the phone, calling them and kind of getting, maybe even going to the psychologist with your partner or person in your life for the first time kind of thing, because and I encourage that if you are someone who is supporting someone, to talk to a medical professional yourself about that. We need to look out for ourselves at the end of the day. And so, and they may be able to give you some good advice too, of maybe, how to encourage the person that you're worried or caring about. Try, that medical professional that you start seeing maybe could help you on that journey.
Right.
So
I think that's key, is if you can get them professional help somehow. And it's good to know that there are some free resources. I think there's still a long way that we can go, even in Canada, to support that, because, I've heard from people who have mental health struggles who have said, like, similar to you, that they have, free support maybe through OHIP, but to get that free support through OHIP, they went through a crisis, and then that crisis admitted them to maybe a hospital, and then through that hospital, they got help. So it's like, maybe there should be, not maybe, there should be more, there should be more resources so that you don't even have to get to that crisis in the first place. And that's a whole other topic in and of itself, with the Canadian healthcare system and how mental health, there could be more resources than, man, like, we could talk about this for hours. I know, like, literally. So it's one of those things where, like, there's still a long way to go, but I'm glad that there are programs and resources out there. And I think that's the biggest thing, is to try to get connected to help as soon as you can, right? And realize that it's a problem, but it may not be a problem that you should be blaming yourself. It could be the wiring of your brain, right?
Exactly. And you may have had a concussion and it changed the neurochemistry in your brain. Now the hormones, the synapses, signaling, electrons firing, the difference, like, it is different, the action potential, the cells talking to one another. And that's the science behind it. And then we interpret it in our body as maybe anxiety or depression or whatever. And then that is, we think we think something's wrong with us, and it's no, that's normal. Your mind has the ability to go into those areas, unfortunately, but that's life. And it's just about recognizing, becoming cognizant about it, and reaching out for help. Definitely.
And I think the other important thing is that a lot of these treatment plans aren't just prescribing medication, and that may not be the cure all for most people. It's a combination of, like, talk therapy as well. And for some people, like you said, it could be their diet, it could be their schedule, it could be doing yoga, it could be finding some kind of purpose. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that, and even the role that naturopathic medicine can play with that as well.
And I mean, for the listeners that may know a bit or maybe nothing at all about naturopathic medicine, I always like to describe it as kind of like a, medical doctor slash psychologist, therapist, because we are privatized, similar to like a psychologist, or like a physiotherapist, chiropractors. And so we sit down with you. Probably the first intake is about 75 minutes. So it's different than going into your walk-in clinic where you're in and out. And, I always say it's not one or the other. We're all healthcare practitioners. We all have our strengths. We all have different tools in our toolkit. And I believe in patient-centered care. So, if someone comes in my office with a broken arm, I'm not going to stick needles in them. I'm going to send them to Emerge.
Yeah.
I had my concussion and I had brain surgery afterwards. Thank God our medical system is where it is today, because I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that. So I 100% love and appreciate Western medicine and all it does. But I think that there is, to alternative holistic medicine where as naturopaths, we try to look at not just the physical, but the mind, the emotional, the spiritual aspects of health and how it affects. But I think the one thing that I'd like to focus on is diet. And I'm going to get a bit into the science and I'm going to make it as digestible as possible. But in terms of
digestible, I see what you did
digestible.
there.
Yeah, because we're going to talk about the gut.
Yeah.
So, and that is something, there's a lot of research coming out to treat concussions by focusing on the gut, because we have different nervous systems in our body, and we have the autonomic, peripheral, and, we have our enteric nervous system, which is the nervous system of our gut. And as we know, there's all these bacteria and microbes in our gut. Like they're a part of us, and they are different entities, and they have a mind of their own. That enteric system is connected to our central nervous system, which goes to our brain. So our brain gut, there's a lot, the hype word nowadays is gut brain connection, but it is 100%. There's science, there's like research behind it that shows that usually when we are eating things in our diet that are pro-inflammatory, certain things like egg and dairy, if you're lactose intolerant, you can just search up pro-inflammatory foods if you want. And sometimes that inflammation, makes our gut scream. And now that nervous system in our gut is going to be screaming and to our brain.
Oh, wow.
And it also goes the other way, where sometimes when we have anxiety, depression, it can affect the gut. And then we have problems digesting and getting in the nutrients that we need to feel good, have energy, because a lot of mental health, you'll have lethargic, you'll be lazy, and you may not be able to be digesting all of those things. A lot of what we do as naturopathic doctors is when we sit down with you for the 75 minutes, we're asking everything. Obviously, just like when you go into a medical doctor for the very first time, you have to fill in past history, family history. We have all that. You have to do that for us too. So we get all that beforehand. And then when we sit down with you, maybe we're going to ask you about that. You'll probably write like, what's your chief concern? Why are you here? Like what brought you here? My gut, this or that, whatever. Yeah. And a lot of the time it's funny because like we may get to that, but sometimes it kind of just becomes like a psychology session where maybe they just needed an open, non-judgmental space to talk. And we're going to get to the diet. We can help with that because, we study a lot of nutrition. That's a big part of our program. And so, but, many times when you see a naturopath, it can seem like it's going off, but it's all going to come together because we want to ask about the social aspects of your life. We want to ask about, even, your work, your family, anything that could like be causing stress, which nowadays everything can. So and yes, we want to get to the root cause. That is like our goal. And also, this is something a professor told me in first year and I loved it. We are in business to be out of business. Meaning,
I remember you telling me this. Yeah, this is really interesting because you wouldn't think that anyone would ever advise you as someone who may run their own practice one day to think like that. So explain that to the listeners.
Well, so I have, the 6 naturopathic oaths, one of which is to doctor as teacher.
Okay.
So as a healthcare practitioner, I want to educate my patients to become self-sufficient so they don't have to come back to me.
Hmm.
Maybe, and let's say you work for a company and you have $500 private insurance and it costs $150 an hour to see a naturopath. Now, I hope that naturopath can literally make you self-sufficient in 3 appointments, a whole
Wow.
year, maybe once every 4 months. I think that's possible.
Wow.
Proper education, and then why you become successful because of that, and you want people to not come back, is because then they're going to tell people to go to you and this and
Exactly.
that and spread the word. So it's the philosophy of being in business to go out of business, but you're never going to go out of business if you do that, because that means you're helping people. And when you help people,
Yeah.
they're going to bring in their family. You'll have referrals and stuff. But I love that. I thought that was beautiful. I thought that was really important. We're not here to take your money. We're here to try and make you as independent in your own health, and
Yeah.
maybe open up your views, broaden your views, make science digestible for you, you
Yeah.
know, make
Yeah.
food more digestible for you.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's kind of like, in terms of other things other than getting help and, talk therapy, there's something called CBT, which is
Yeah.
cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of research that shows that the best treatment for mental health is a combination of, proper prescription drugs plus cognitive behavioral therapy. So, them together kind of thing. And then it's good to throw in a healthy diet with that. It's good to
Yeah.
go out for your walks. Let's get in nature some more. Let's get off our phones a bit. Let's get off of social media. Let's stop looking at negative news. There's so many lifestyle tweaks. And, at the end of the day, I kind of see myself, what I want to become is like a lifestyle coach, right? That's kind of like my goal as a doctor, is to become that kind of lifestyle
Hmm.
coach.
Yeah, that's amazing. I could totally see you doing that and doing TED Talks or doing some kind of speeches that are going to be educating people. And yeah, no, that's great. And it's interesting that you mentioned CBT, because I've opened up to listeners before about this, I believe, but I've actually gone to therapy and had cognitive behavioral therapy, and I found it so beneficial. And that's the thing, is like,
Cool.
I would suggest to anyone that they go to, a couple of sessions with a
Yeah.
therapist, whether they think they have an issue or not, because like
Yeah.
the things that I learned working with a psychologist and working, via the method of cognitive behavioral therapy, like even like listing out the negative thoughts that I was feeling. How long did those negative thoughts last? And this is just one of the treatment methods, and
Yep.
maybe I'm not describing it properly, but this is how I remember it, is
Yep.
listing it out, what triggered that thought. And even just being cognizant of that, I found that the negative thoughts that I was putting on myself started to, disappear. And it wasn't happening as much, just because I was tracking it and realizing, when you actually look at the root cause of what started that, you can realize when you start having a negative thought that you can grab it right then and there and throw it out, or have thoughts that disprove that negative thought. Have
Yep.
things that you're working on in your life, or the accomplishments that you're doing, or the ways that you're working on yourself. And I found that, I think I went to 3 sessions with this psychologist, and it changed my life, really, because I started to realize, like, I have the power in myself to be able to manage this. And sometimes you're right. Sometimes that is an additional medication. Sometimes that is some kind of additional, meeting with a naturopath, or, it doesn't have to be a one size fits all. Like for me, talking to someone and him telling me the different methods that I could use to manage, negative thoughts
Yeah.
or being anxious, that helped me a lot. So that's the thing with even being able to see someone for a session or two. I don't think there's any harm to it, in my opinion. Look up reviews, make sure the person is well respected.
You want to find someone that resonates with you. There's like,
Yeah.
there's lists of psychologists, and you can and you can look through it. You know, it's like Yelp reviews,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
find someone that works for you. 100%.
Totally. So to wrap things up, I would love for you to, and I would love to have you on the podcast again. I think we are going to have you on, talking about, different topics as well. But, for men's mental health specifically, what advice do you have for men in general who are maybe brought up, like you said, in a stoic way and not to show emotion? Like, how can you get past that, especially when it's ingrained in you? And you and I talked about this. I just thought about this. You and I have talked about how even some women, and this is
Yeah.
in the straight community with men and women dating, but some women don't find it attractive to see a man crying or a man emotional. I've known people that have said that to me, that, oh, he started crying about this, and I don't know, like, I mean, I want to be there for him, but it was one of those things where maybe they're just starting to date someone and the person showed a little bit more emotion, and it was like kind of a red flag in a way. So
Yeah.
how do you manage this? Because, for that guy in that situation, maybe he grew up with, parents that were like stoic, or a dad that was stoic and was like, don't show your emotions, suck it up. And then maybe the one time he shows emotion to a girl, she backs off a little bit. So it's like this cycle, right? So it's like, how do we
Yeah.
move past that?
It's a loaded question, but
Yeah.
my intuitive and first answer, and it's hard to get there, but like, men need to cry. Men
Yeah.
need to start releasing their emotions. And I know that, even though I cried a lot as a kid, I had a lot of emotions. And like, in the past couple of years when I depressed and stuff, I stopped crying. And, recently when I kind of like open up and more emotions, like, that crying is a release of those suppressed emotions. And also
Yeah.
something that you touched upon in terms of like, and it's beautiful what you said about cognitive behavioral therapy. I think it's so good to have anecdotal, personal stories of, hey, it worked for me. I'm not telling you to do it, but this
Yeah.
is what worked for me. And I think
Yeah.
that's important. But something you touched upon was kind of like digesting emotions. And this is something my Reiki master taught me, is that when we suppress emotions, we're not dealing with it. If we feel fear or anger, we need to feel it. We shouldn't suppress it. We should recognize it and then maybe go into why or how we're feeling it. But it's about being okay with that emotion and digesting it, right?
Yeah.
And so it starts with that. But the real beginning for men is to start getting that emotional release. Now, what do you need to do that? I know for me, I need a very, very safe, non-judgmental space. Even though I'm an emotional guy and I'm telling you guys need to cry, I still find it so hard to cry in front of someone, even the ones closest to me.
Yeah.
And even when I went to, at our school, it's a 4-year program in naturopathic college. The first 3 years is all school. The last year is like internship. And, I see the 4th years, it's much cheaper because it's a teaching clinic. So it's cheaper for everyone. So I'll do a plug. Everyone come down to Robert Chad Naturopathic Clinic, North York, Shepherd and Leslie. It's like $48 if you're a student. It's like 18, but you see a 4th year, someone like myself. And in those rooms, I feel comfortable. I was able to cry in front of my intern last year. However, when she would leave the room, I could cry more.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's hard for me to tell listeners like where they can find that, but it's about trying to find a non-judgmental open space where you feel that you can start expressing those emotions. And I'll be honest, the best way to do it is to just cry. So that's my tip of the day. Men need to cry.
I love that.
and
That may even
and
be
it's
the
okay.
podcast title. Men need to
Men need
cry. It's true. And it is okay. I know.
It is
Oh, I love
okay.
that.
And
Yeah.
we need to tell ourselves, because the stigma, everything from the subconscious, toxic masculinity that exists and is subconsciously ingrained in us, we don't think it's okay. And like you said, in the straight community, some women, they have that subconscious mentality also in them. And
Yeah.
it's not bad. It's all men have it as well. And so, it's all about us becoming more self-aware, recognizing that, oh, maybe I am a little biased towards this. Maybe I haven't been as open towards like the man in my life, whoever. being open because my dad never showed emotions.
Yeah.
The males in my life never did it. So if I see someone do it, that's weird. So it's about, you know, asking ourselves, why do we have those thoughts? A lot of cognitive behavioral therapy has to do with mindfulness. And that's just about looking inwards and being mindful of, I'm feeling this. Why am I feeling it? And so that is kind of a lot of like the root of like can get you to like, okay, now I recognize that maybe I do have a bit of stigma inside me, and maybe that's stopping me from going to see a psychologist, or that's stopping me from releasing these emotions and just being okay with crying.
Yeah.
And hey, if there's a movie that makes you cry, watch it. Even if you don't know what emotions you're releasing, that crying's good. So if you need something like a movie, or you know something that's going to make you cry, because it's like, I can't just sit here and start crying if I think about things.
Yeah.
You know, maybe like there's certain things. And if you cry in a movie, you're crying. It's the movie. It's sad, but you're also crying because you probably have stuff that you're holding back, and your body is using this movie as an excuse to get over that stigma.
So true. Yeah.
So, hey, if you need to watch a really sad romantic movie that's going to make you cry, that's where we can start.
Yeah. Or even a sad song, you know, having a sad playlist.
Perfect.
I've definitely done that. That's like,
oh yeah,
that's great
and that's healing. That is healing, you know. And men shouldn't be afraid to have a sad playlist on their Spotify.
Yeah,
they shouldn't be afraid to, you know, all the kinds of musics we listen to and stuff. But you know, again, men maybe because they want to seem tough and strong, they don't want, you know, more sad or emotional type music on their Spotify. But hey, you know, there is an emotional awakening sometimes with music. We all feel it. Why do you think it's ingrained in our culture? So
100%.
Music can also definitely help express those emotions. So I like this. I think we covered a lot.
And thanks for joining us again. And I think that your insights are really valuable. I know that the listeners will find them valuable as well. And I hope that they'll share it with their friends and family in their lives who, you know, could benefit from listening to something like this. I'm glad we touched on this topic. And, you know, is there any way that if listeners want to, you know, get in touch with you or say thank you for your thoughts, or like if you want to share your Instagram or your social media, it's really up to you. Now would be a time that you could do that.
My Instagram and my Facebook are both just Taylor Blixt, so Taylor, and my last name is B as in boy, Lixt. I mean, my Facebook and Instagram are both open. You know, you can message me. I'll message back for sure. So I'm very open to getting messages. If I don't get back to you right away, nothing against you. I will message you in time. But yeah, I mean, for any listeners, even if they want to share something with me, I'm here to listen. I'm here to be an ear, but I don't mind at all. The reason why I have this on my sleeve and I'm doing what I'm doing is because I want to be an open book. I'm trying to lead by example a bit. Yeah. To just kind of show people that it's okay for men to cry. It's okay for men to show their emotions, and we need to talk about this stuff a bit more. So it was awesome being on here and getting the opportunity to talk about it, because as you can tell, it's a passion of mine for sure. It's what I am, want to help and do in the future and stuff. And I'm looking forward to our next one, because like you said, we get together and we chat for hours. So, and now the listeners can get a bit of insight into those chats where we just go off on tangent. So I'm excited. And thanks, Taylor. And again, the listeners know, and any new listeners, you can follow the Is This Adulthood podcast on Twitter, ITA_podcast on Twitter, or Is This Adulthood on Instagram. And we'd love to get your topic ideas and maybe any topics that you'd love to hear Taylor and I talk about in the future, because I love this dynamic. I thought it went really well. And thanks again, Taylor, for joining. I appreciate it. Awesome, Ryan. Appreciate the opportunity. Grateful for you as a friend. And namaste, which means the light in me sees the light in you. Namaste.